All Things Success podcast, episode number 9. We have Rahim here. Rahim, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm super excited to have you on today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I'm excited about everything except for the Raptors. Everything's good except for that.
Yeah,
So
goes
why don't
back.
we why don't we just go ahead and get into it? Start by telling us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So, I guess if we start at the beginning, when I was a kid, my parents didn't really believe in video games. Instead, they gave me Lego. But ever since I was a kid in high school and elementary school, I was always very creative in the sense of with my hands, always making stuff, always coming up with ideas, just always brainstorming random things all the time. And that kind of took me to the world of industrial design, which is product design. So got accepted to a program in Ottawa, Canada, at Carleton University, went down that path. And then I came across an experience where I designed a product. It was a shoe bag that used ultraviolet light to kill odor in your shoes. And then I was kind of curious about the world of business and design because I felt as a designer, you're not really educated in the world of business as a designer. And I honestly do think it's a flaw in the system because designers are very entrepreneurial and they're very creative, but they're just not given that aspect of going down that entrepreneurial path because all they're really focusing is the product itself and not really the business model, not really learning about expanding it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's like super relevant what you said, and I can like relate to that because you always hear like if you're someone like myself, you're into like biographies and stuff, right, about people, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs that come up with this great invention but end up getting screwed over on the business side.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, go on.
And then you think about like businesses like Airbnb, which was actually founded by industrial designers. I'm sure you know the story, but the background was that they basically came to San Francisco for the Industrial Design Society of America conference, and they couldn't find a hotel room that was cheap enough. And then they kind of came up with that idea and adapted, and then turned it into taking better photographs to expand their business and just become more successful, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of case studies around where design entrepreneurs kind of have had so much success because they just think differently. They have another lens. They're not all about monetization. They're more about the experience, more about the product.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way, especially now when you think of business school. Like a lot of business schools are thinking about design thinking, which is very saturated now. Like everyone's an expert apparently these days.
Yeah.
It's just a way of thinking, and just it's a mindset at the end of the day, right? And I think when you have that mindset of just continuously iterating and continuously coming up with ideas and really focusing on the experience of the user or the customer, I think it goes a long way.
Totally. I'm definitely like I've always been that way. Like, are you? So you an avid Shark Tank watcher?
I am. Fun fact. So that product, the UV sports bag that I designed, I actually got accepted into the Canadian version of Shark Tank.
No way.
Yeah. So this was back in 2011, but I actually turned it down because so my roommate at the time, he was a business guy. He convinced me to, I was applying to like entrepreneurship contests in my university and like winning some money and so on and so forth. But he just told me, he's like, yo, it's called Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
Dragon's Den's coming to town in Ottawa. Why don't you just show up? So I was kind of contemplating the entire day whether or not I should go. And within the last 2 hours, I just like decided to do it.
Dang.
Showed up, got accepted to be on the show, got a time slot, but then I actually turned it down because I just felt, number one, I would get embarrassed because I don't know anything about business.
Yeah.
Number two, I didn't even know how much funding I would need. Like I had this like prototype, right? So I just didn't feel very comfortable going down that path. At the same time, I did apply to grad school where I found this program in San Francisco at the California College of the Arts, one of the top private design schools in the States. And I just felt like that was my gut telling me that like, this is really interesting. Because the thing was that I was looking into business programs in Canada, but the problem was that I just didn't want to be in a room full of bankers, no offense to bankers or finance people, because they think differently, right? Like they think you're different if you're like coming up with all these ideas and they're just like not, you know what I mean? Like it's just like a different. I'd rather be in the same room with the same species as rather than like people that are like totally not aligned with what your goals are.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally understand that.
Yeah, so that's why I spontaneously showed up 3 days to San Francisco for that program, and I'm super grateful. It was a fantastic program, amazing people doing amazing things. One of my buddies designed Oru Kayak, which was on Shark Tank. Like,
oh wow,
so many people that like have done so many unique things out of that program. That's not conventional in regards to just being a designer or just being a business major.
Yeah.
I've got friends working at Facebook and Google and Uber and like doing design research and leading the practices and stuff like that. So it's just really inspiring to see your peers kind of like taking on the world from a different perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's funny though that you say that because I mean, even people that come in, or at least the Shark Tank I watch, I've never seen the Canadian version, but people get torn apart even just for having a prototype with no sales.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like and that's the thing that I felt that I just didn't feel comfortable. Like I literally had like it's kind of worked, but like I didn't do like extensive testing on it or anything like that, right? And I won some competitions and stuff like that. Like I came top 10 in internationally in the James Dyson Award, and that opened up a lot of doors to be interviewed on the Discovery Channel and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like people were knocking on my door. Like I was considering getting a patent. I didn't end up getting a patent because it's like when you're a student and you're asked to like drop 10K on a patent and you have no idea how like where this is going to go. You know what I mean? It's like it's really difficult to make those types of decisions.
Yeah, it's a
especially when
risk.
you're a student, right? So I mean, I'm grateful for what it's done. It didn't really go anywhere, but I have a lot of like ideas and products that haven't gone anywhere. But I mean, I'm just kind of grateful for the process of like having that in your portfolio,
Yeah.
that story, and so on and so forth.
It's almost something you can even put on your resume still,
Oh,
right?
100%. Yeah, I would definitely say I got into grad school as the second youngest in my program to get in,
Wow.
with just like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like not a lot of, I mean, usually in an MBA, you need 4 years of work experience. And I
Yeah.
kind of went right out of undergrad with 1 year of experience doing internships.
Dang.
So I'm grateful for that. But I just kind of, it was just my gut feeling to just kind of do it because I always wanted to get a business degree.
Right.
It just kind of added more ammo to my tool or more tools to my tool belt.
Yeah, totally. So you touched a little bit about the gym bag. Was there any other inventions or designs that you know, before Arabesque Studios and before Shield Hero and all that that you?
Yeah, my thesis project was actually a toilet for disaster relief. So I actually went to, humanitarian design was something that I was always interested in. And that's something that was always a focus. Like it was interesting, right? Like, designing for good, designing for humanity.
Yeah.
So back in 2010, there was an earthquake that was hit in Chile. And one of the options for a thesis project was actually heading to South America, to a small town in Chile called Lota. And there we were tasked to come up with products that would help the situation. Now you have to understand that these individuals are living in a 3x6 temporary housing with barely any electricity, barely running water, lack of toilets. So one of the insights, this was like probably the most difficult thing I've ever dealt with because I didn't even understand Spanish. Like besides Banio and Hola, like that's the extent of my Spanish.
Yeah.
But we had a translator, and I came across this one family, and the night before, the woman, she was pregnant, and the night before, he was actually, he was basically using buckets to go to the bathroom. And then the police actually, like he was dumping his waste, and then the police officer, I can't remember if he got a ticket or just was cited or something like that, but regardless, it was just like an interesting insight because you're like, what are they supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of like my moment that I kind of realized that, okay, this is really awkward to spend your thesis working on a toilet.
Yeah.
It was definitely an interesting, I'm trying to think of a pun here, but it was an interesting experience nonetheless, because the problem wasn't designing a toilet. The problem was the system, right? Like, what do you do with the waste?
Yes.
Right? So that's where the idea of like, and then it was also the fact that how do you deploy these toilets after a disaster's happened, right? So it was kind of like it was a flat pack toilet for disaster relief. It was called the DR toilet. So it's kind of like imagine IKEA, that it would just get slotted in. And then that being said, the other challenge was like you can't include any instructions or any tools. So how do you design something that's very intuitive, right? That you don't know where in the world this could be deployed, right? So the screws that I used was slot head screws. So basically you can use a butter knife or a credit card or sommes like that to just kind of put it together.
Yeah, to make it as easy as possible on those people.
Exactly. So you don't need any tools, and that obviously adds a lower cost to production. I got, like, over the years while I was back in San Francisco, I got contacted by a couple of NGOs that wanted to pursue this. But at the same time, it's a big investment in terms of molding. And, the other challenge here is that, a disaster isn't something that always happens. You know what I mean? So it's like, are these companies going to invest all this money into something that you know what I mean? It's a really weird situation. Yeah. So unfortunately it didn't go anywhere either, but I mean, it was still a cool experience nonetheless.
Right. So this is a little bit off track for our questions, but What is the process like when you first come up with an idea and you really feel passionate about it and you feel like it could go somewhere? Is it just kind of all you doing research, or are you reaching out to different, like, do you have like certain contacts you reach out to, or are you reaching out to like different people that may be professionals in those fields? Or how does that work for
Yeah,
that?
all the above. I think one of the things about being a designer is like a friend of mine described me as a chameleon because I've done everything from like a toilet to designing a mosque
Yeah.
to like face shields and like everything in it. Like I've done office furniture design and like soft goods and like worked at Samsung, like literally done
Yeah.
like everything under the umbrella, right? But I think the one thing I've realized about myself, and he kind of described me as a chameleon, where I think it's a good analogy because you kind of have to adapt yourself into whatever it is that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, with the face shield, which we'll touch on, I had to reach out to doctors. Like, I don't know anything about medical design,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't, it was a tough situation. Like, everyone's stuck at home, but like, how can you use your resources like Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff to kind of reach out to these people
Yeah.
and reach out to the doctors and the individuals in internal medicine, the ones
Right.
that are right in the front lines,
Yeah.
and get feedback on face shields or whatever it is, right? So I think the number one rule for successful design is literally knowing your customer, empathizing with your customer, putting yourself in their shoes, and really understanding what is the actual need and pain point for them. And that's a major flaw that a lot of entrepreneurs it's not that they don't realize it, but it's like, I have this idea and now I'm going to force feed this idea upon customers.
Yeah.
And it should be the other way around, right? Because you can't really force feed something that might not have a need, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah. It's got to be demand for the market, right?
Exactly. You have to and it's not just talking to people, it's also market analysis, trends and stuff like that to make sure there's a good market fit for whatever it is that you're creating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, so now that we mentioned it, tell us about Shield Hero and how the idea and kind of motivation came about with this product.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's crazy that it's been pretty much 4 months now. So basically, a friend of mine, he invited me to this. He's an engineer. I went to the University of Waterloo. He invited me to this Facebook group, and it was basically about, I think at the time, like 12 to 15,000 individuals from all around the world, engineers, designers, like random people trying to solve the PPE shortage problem. So, there's like super motivated people that are like trying to make a ventilator, like trying to make face masks, like face shields, everything before everything took off and everyone and their grandmother was making face masks, right? So basically, and then anyway, so I have a laser cutter. So I ended up investing $50,000 on a laser cutter in my basement. Dude. And the reason for that was that when I was in San Francisco, I got exposed to this place called Tech Shop. So the one thing that I tell everyone about, like, they're like, describe San Francisco, and obviously you live in the Bay Area, so you know how it is, and like it's an interesting place, right? Like, so many motivated people like yourself. There's just like so much stimulation there. Like, you literally have to like in order to stay alive, you just have to do something interesting, right? So at the time, I kind of pivoted my career from like product design to user experience design, which at the time I wasn't a huge fan of.
Yeah.
But at the same time, my mentor introduced me to Tech Shop. And it was basically a makerspace for creative people. A lot of people, end up making costumes for Burning Man. But it was just a really interesting space. Like, Square came out of Tech Shop. So it was like it was a makerspace. So they had a wood shop, metal shop, 3D printers, laser cutters, sewing machines. They had classes, and they would teach you how to weld and like everything you could possibly imagine in this one place. And I was just like, this is like a kid in the candy store for me, right? Or I felt like I was a kid in the candy store. So I got a membership, and then so we'll probably get to talk about this in a second, but that kind of led me to the stuff I do on the side with products I design that are inspired by Islamic geometry. But anyways, I wanted to continue doing that when I came back to Toronto. And I found a makerspace in Toronto, but it was just difficult to, lug wood on the subway, and like it was just challenging.
Yeah.
So anyway, saved my money, basically decided not to put a down payment on a condo, and bought a machine for $50,000. No,
I love that, man. I love that.
Best investment ever.
Hell yeah.
And that's what kind of led me to make the shield. So basically then I got some plastic, started prototyping, and I actually have my prototypes here. So the first one,
nice,
straightforward, right? So it was, attaching a piece of plastic with foam.
Yeah.
And then stapling a strap to it, right?
Okay.
But the problem here is that, everyone's head is a different size, right? I have a tiny head. Other people might have a bigger head. So it wasn't the most comfortable thing. So then I went to the dollar store and bought some Velcro,
nice.
Right? And cut a little slot here, right? If you can see.
Yeah, I can see it.
And then, now you have about 2 inches of leeway to kind of adjust this face shield.
Yeah.
To your head size, right? So this was kind of version 2. So that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier with like you're constantly iterating
Yeah.
for the user, right? Which are doctors, which are literally putting their lives on the line.
Yes.
And I don't take this lightly at all. Like it was it was a responsibility. Like I don't want to design crap and like, put it out there and like then like stuff happens. I would feel awful, right? So then I got in contact. I reached out to a friend of mine on Twitter, and she gave me the contact of all these doctors, and then like these random doctors started messaging me on WhatsApp, and then I kind of got an insight from one of the doctors, and she was telling me that Rahim, what's happening is that a lot of these face shields are going in the garbage because what happens is that the foam, you can't sterilize it, right? You can't clean it. So if the virus or the bacteria gets contaminated, you have to throw everything away, and that's the whole reason behind the shortage of the PPE, right?
Yes.
So then she, motivated me to design a shield that was reusable, right? So then I came up with this guy, and there's no foam here, right? So you can clean everything with, rubbing alcohol, sanitizer, or soap and water, and you can remove the face shield, right? So if you want to detach it and clean it, you can do that, and you could reattach it, right? Which I.
You can clean, so you can literally separate it, clean the whole entire thing.
Yeah, and you could buy, or at this time I was donating, which I'll get to in a second. I could just give them more shields. They could like either reuse it or just use another one rather than buying a whole thing again. Yeah. So it was a more sustainable approach to face shields.
Yes.
At the same time, so on that Facebook group, I just posted something saying I'm from Toronto, any Canadians here, and this like random guy, Landon, started this project called the. I forgot the name of the group from the top of my head, but anyways, invited me to the Slack group. And there I was just like posting what I'm doing and like all my iterations and like the other challenges like supply chain, right? Like where am I getting the foam? Where am I getting the plastic? All this stuff, right? Because everything's happening so fast, right?
Yeah.
And this is the moment like everything went down, like everything got locked down, like everyone was paranoid to even like step outside their house and so on and so forth, right? So in that Slack group was Globe and Mail, which is a well-known newspaper publication in Canada. And this reporter just messages me randomly and he's like, hey, do you have some time to chat? I'm like, sure. So he gives me a call and then I'm like telling him, and I get really excited. I get super passionate when I'm working on stuff like this. And I'm just like telling him everything I'm doing. And he's like, all right, can we send a photographer to your basement? I'm like, okay. So this photographer, Chris, shows up to my basement. Basically, it's a 1-hour photo shoot in my basement, like taking all these photos of what I'm doing. And he's like super intrigued and super interested.
Yeah.
And then on April 1st, they run the article, and I was on the front page, which I'm super grateful for, of the Globe and Mail, and like a full spread of like all these pictures and the story, and like not just me, a lot of other Canadians that were kind of doing this, like engineers and designers and so on and so forth. And then things went wild. I started getting like 1 billion messages on every single stream of social media. My email box started blowing up, and everyone's like, how do I help? How do I help? Take a step back. The publisher, the writer, he was asking me like, how are you going to sell these? Like so on and so forth. So my sister, I have a twin sister, and she works in public health at a hospital in Toronto. And, she introduced me to their buyer, and they're all like, we need shields and so on and so forth. But the challenge here was that like, there's so much red tape, unfortunately, at hospitals. Like there's a whole chain of command, and like everyone has to sign off on it. It's just like a whole process, right? So the writer, he encouraged me to just donate it. And obviously things are happening so fast, so I'm like trying to figure everything out by literally like every couple of hours. And then the donation stuff happened. So then I'm just like, all right, I'm just going to create a GoFundMe. So within 48 hours, I raised like $8,000, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm just like, why are strangers giving me money? Like I'm like confused right now. Like, I don't know what's happening. Right. So that allowed me to, get more plastic, get more supplies. And then I was on this relentless mission. I mean, you follow me on Instagram, you follow my journey, like all-nighters for like pretty much all of April, just like on this mission of relentlessness of just making shields. And then the amazing thing was that this lady, Audrey, she was the CEO of a marketing company in Markham. And she just randomly reached out to me and she's like, how can I help? I have this 40,000 square foot warehouse. I love your story. Like, do you need boxes? Do you need delivery? Like, what can you do? So I just like called her, or she called me. And she's like, I'm on a board of a long-term care center. And this was like before. So unfortunately, 80% of the deaths, or 75% of the deaths in Canada through COVID were all in long-term care centers and senior homes, which is very unfortunate, right? So she had some foresight, and she's like, these long-term centers have like nothing, like let's just donate it to, and she had all these contacts because she was on the board. And she's like, how can I help? I'm like, honestly, like if you can make the phone calls and like, you know, take care of delivery, that'll just make my life easier because then I don't have to worry about that and I can just focus on making shields, right? So her COO, Sherwin, would come to my house every day in the month of April and most of May, and would literally show up at my house at around 1:30 and like 10 o'clock at night because they had like a late shift and a morning shift.
Yeah.
And he would just like, I would give him 50 shields, 100 shields, 150 shields. Like it was just like at this moment I've made over 6,000 shields single-handedly.
Wow, dude.
It's nuts. And with the help of my dad and volunteers that helped and stuff like that. But just reflecting back on it, it's all these like people within your community that was able to help me do this, right? There's no way in hell I would be able to do this.
Yeah, it's never on your own, right?
It's just like the constant support. And like the one realization I've had is like just how generous people can be in just in general, right? Like if someone believes in what you're capable of, and I'm just reflecting back on like, you know, I raised to this day about $16,000 or $18,000, can't remember. I'm just reflecting back. I'm like, why did these strangers give me money? And then I'm just like, obviously they believed in me. They saw some potential. They saw my mission. They just knew me. Even like there's people that I hadn't spoken to in like a decade from like undergrad or like whatever it was, my previous home of Ottawa. And people are just sending me money. Like it was just like, it was madness, right? Which I'm super grateful for to this day. So yeah, I mean, I think that summarizes pretty much the mission. And now I've been kind of, you know, the hospitals are pretty good now. So I kind of took another pivot and I'm just selling them to small businesses that need them online, experimenting with Facebook ads.
Yeah.
This has been a huge learning curve for me and super profitable as well. And I also pivoted into shields for kids, which is kind of random too. Nice. So this is kind of like, you know, a friend of mine, she's like, I'm taking my kids to Edmonton and my son, he's 3 years old and he can't keep a mask on him for the life of him. Can you like just make a shield for kids? And I'm like, this is interesting. And I was obviously busy. And then on my website, I put up this app that's enabled to my WhatsApp. So I have random strangers like messaging me, and it's a good way to convert as well.
Yeah.
I get this random message from a lady, and she's like, do you make shields for kids? And I'm like, okay, there's a lot of people asking for this. So I go to her house. It was like a half an hour drive away, literally just drop off like a regular shield for free. And I'm like, once again, I don't know anything about kids. And I'm like, can you just give this to your kid? And like, can you just measure for me like the distance of your kids and stuff like that? So that goes back to the iteration and like doing research and like understanding your market and all that stuff. And then like the night after, I made some prototypes and took it to my other friend. She has, her son was 3, her daughter was 6. And then I realized that middle ground is 3 to 5 to have a 6.5 inch shield, and then 6 to 12, which would have a 7.5 inch shield. And then I developed 2 products, and like, it's been like 2 weeks and I had a wholesale, drove 2 hours to Kingston, Ontario, which is 2 hours east, to hand deliver these shields. Cause I wanted to understand my customer. I wanted to understand like, why are they buying this? Right. And I wanted to like, you know, create that rapport. And it was like a 2-hour drive, basically listen to podcasts and so on and so forth. But I think, you know, like I said, and I sound like a broken record now, but you really need to understand your customer and really empathize with them, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that was that.
That's really cool because I think you're really onto something. Because I mean, with kids, and some out here, there's some counties out here where they've been told they're going back to school,
right?
And I just can't picture kids keeping a mask on the whole time. And I think it could be a lot different with shields, and especially reusable shields, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I saw a video on CNN with schools in Korea that are open, and all of those kids are wearing shields because you can actually see the child, right? You can't, like, they're not covered up with a mask, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, there could be an opportunity down the road, but I'm just taking it day by day, and we'll see how things play out.
Right. So where do you see Shield Hero in, let's say, 5-10 years?
So to be honest, I mean, I just heard today on the news that apparently we're going to be wearing face masks for the next 2 years. I mean, it's hard to really say where this would be in 5 years, to be honest, because I don't know, right? Like when I started this, I thought I would be done when I ran out of plastic, right? But here I am, I'm still doing it. And it's been very rewarding. It's been something that I'll always remember. Like, when I'm like 50 years old, reflecting back on this period of time, and I'm like, what did I do that made a difference or whatever it was? So I'm grateful for that. But looking back into 5 years, honestly, I can't even tell you what's gonna happen in the next 6 months. Yeah. But I mean, to be honest, I don't see this, like, I don't see myself doing this in 5 years or even maybe in a year, just because I get bored really, really easily. I'm sure I'll be doing something else. So I think I'm grateful for adapting to what was needed at
Yes.
the moment, and I was able to make a difference. But to answer your question, I don't know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the name is awesome. Like, just Shield Hero is a great name as it is. Does it baffle you at all that there's like before this that there was no reusable face shields?
It's a good question. I
Or
mean,
just
there,
I guess not reusable. I guess yeah, it is reusable, right?
yeah, I mean, there's like, there's the hardcore ones that are like made from heavy duty plastic. And then
Yeah.
you look at like welder masks and like stuff like that. So I wouldn't say it wasn't there, but I think for the application of like hospitals and stuff like that, to be honest, I'm not sure if anything like that did exist.
Yeah.
I'm sure it did, but I
Yeah.
mean, for the most part, the thing about the foam shields are that they cost nothing, right? They cost like $1 or $2
Yeah.
or $3 max, right? So they're able to wholesale that. They're able to make that really quickly, but it's not solving the problem of like, if the bacteria gets into the foam,
Yeah.
like it's contaminated, right?
Yeah.
And the really unfortunate part was like I was talking to so many different doctors, and like I was told like some of these guys had to wear them for a week, if not a month, and it's the foam, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it's terrifying, right? And I'm
Yeah.
just sitting in my basement trying to like figure all this out. I'm like I'm not in the scene, right? Like I don't know what's happening right then and there, right? Another interesting example was so on my headpiece, when I was like getting into the branding, I was talking to the doctor and I'm like, what if I put like a heart? My brand has a heart, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, what if I, laser cut a heart into my shield? And do you know what she tells me? And this was like a monumental moment. She's like, Rahim, I'm talking to family members that aren't even able to see their loved ones. They're like crying on the floor, and I wouldn't feel comfortable having a heart on my forehead. And I'm just like, whoa, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know how to react to that. Like, I'm just like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. I didn't even consider that, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was just like in the moment, I'm like, how do I make this look better? And like, how do I
Right.
brand this and whatever, so on and so forth, right? But I didn't take into consideration like what they're actually dealing with. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's real, right?
Totally.
So yeah, I mean that's like the number one rule. You have to put yourself in the shoes of these individuals to actually understand what they're dealing with. So
Right.
whatever service or whatever product you're creating, like, is it actually solving a pain point and solving a problem?
Yeah.
Does that make
I mean,
sense?
it seems to me like I just feel like, and obviously I haven't had any, firsthand experience like you have been dealing with this product, but just to me with plastic bans and stuff like that, obviously with grocery stores and stuff like that, it seems like it would just be a no-brainer to purchase your product over, throw away,
Right.
older model shields, right?
Right. But I would say that's the other challenge, right? Because I don't have experience with dealing with wholesale and like,
Yeah.
how do you get a product into a store? Like, those are all the things that I'm still learning, right? Everything, like, which I'm once again grateful for it. Like, everything has been word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
So over the course of like March, April, May, it was entirely word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that's when I started experimenting with Facebook ads to kind of help leverage the expanding this into, and once again, one of the questions that you were going to ask me was, would I expand this into the United States?
Yes.
I have sent this to my mentor and like a couple of people here and there, like friends of mine, but the other challenge is shipping, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a one-man show, so it's kind of difficult to like, go to the post office, make shields, and like, I'm doing 100. I teach design at a university. Like, I'm working on a mosque right now. There's like a lot of things I'm dealing with now, right? So it's kind of hard. So basically, one of the things that I decided to do was literally just do delivery or pickup only within Toronto, in terms of the distribution of my shields.
Yeah.
I know if I was able to expand this to Canada and the US, it would 100% fly. But maybe that's something I should think about in the next couple of weeks.
Totally. I mean, I'm sure that, like, I'm sure someone here, like, who has a similar background to you would be like, oh, hell yeah, let's do it. You know what I mean?
And at the same time, I mean, I'm more than happy to like give my files and my design files to anyone that wants to make these in another country or like in the US. Like, I don't care, it's helping people at the end of the day, right? Like, obviously I spent a lot of time making the design, but like I could give the file to anyone, right? Like, if you have a laser cutter and like 0.06 millimeter plastic and 0.02, like, knock yourself out, right?
Yeah.
And someone asked me like, would you patent this? I'm like, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what difference does it make to me, right?
Yeah. That's awesome. That's like, it's just like true, like, want to help people.
Yeah.
Because anybody else, I mean, even my like selfish way of thinking would be like, oh, I'm going to patent this immediately. And you know what I mean? Try to make money off this, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, I'll come up with something else tomorrow. Like it's
Yeah.
not the end of the world for me, right? Like I'll be okay.
That's super cool.
Or maybe I should be more selfish. I don't know.
Right. So to kind of transition to another area of our podcast here, I've always kind of got the feeling that, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Arabesque Studios.
Correct? Yeah.
Awesome. Has always been one of your passions, because that was like when we first got to know each other, and I just, obviously seeing your social media, that was what you were doing like all the time in your spare time.
Yeah.
Tell me more about, how this skill and business came about.
Yeah, so it all started from a friend of mine. She told me about, so the Aga Khan Museum is one of the first Islamic museums that opened in North America, and that's in Toronto. And the friend of mine told me about the gift shop and introduced me to a designer. And then I was on this mission to like, and at the same time, I pivoted my career from like product design to UX design. And at the time, I wasn't super happy with my day job. And I needed to kind of put my energy into something else. And that's when, like I said earlier, my mentor gave me a membership to Tech Shop because she knew the founders. And it was like a 10-minute walk from my place in SF, right on Mission Street, Mission and Fifth. So anyways, then I was on this relentless mission to design a product for the coaster. It totally went stealth. Got it into the gift shop, was super happy. And then I guess it's been about 6 years now. And then it's turned into all these other things. So to kind of summarize, like I've done bowls for my Moss, for the Moss in North America, like a money collection bowl.
Yeah.
I've now designed 2 Moss. And the ironic part is I'm not even an architect. Like when I was a kid, I always wanted to be an architect. It never ended up playing out the way it was supposed to, which is fine. But you know what I mean? Like it was just like serendipity and like just things just ended up working out. And the best thing about what I'm doing is number one, I was learning about Islamic geometry and I was learning about woodworking and like laser cutting and all these different things, which I love learning in general. Branding, packaging, distribution. I was basically taking these coasters in my suitcase and bringing them to Toronto every time like I came down. Like that was my distribution, right?
Yeah.
But reflecting back on everything, I think the biggest thing that makes me so happy is just the convergence of like my passion for design and my passion for my faith. And now I'm able to create something and sell something and make products and, use my volunteer time to work on a mosque. And all of this work is volunteering, right? It's just like, you feel good about it, right? So that's where that happened. And obviously, when you have a full-time job, it's hard to go full steam ahead with a passion, right? Or with your side hustle, right? So now that I have my own machine, I was actually supposed to, in San Francisco, they have the Renegade show, which is kind of an art fair, an art show. And in Toronto, they have this thing called the One of a Kind show. So I actually submitted an application and I got in at my first shot for the spring, March 2020 show. But obviously because of COVID, it got canceled. So the idea there was, that was my first experience with like a craft show. And it was an experiment for me, right? Like I got a table, a 4x8 table. It was about, or 4x2 table. It was about $800. Let's see what happens. Let's just do an experiment, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if people will actually buy this stuff, right? Like I've been selling it at the gift shop for like the last 6 years, and that's been the only place I've been selling them at, right? Okay. So in January, I finally like launched my Shopify store online for the first time in 6 years, and so on and so forth. So the March was going to be the first time like I kind of went like, I wouldn't say full steam ahead, but like it was an experiment, right?
Yeah.
And then COVID happened, so that was this whole pivot into Shields. So obviously the plan is to like, I have so many ideas of different products to make and, so on and so forth. I got a sketchbook full of stuff, but obviously you can't do as much as you want to do as a one-man show, right? And that's where scalability is a huge challenge for any business, right? Like, how do you teach people to do what I do? Or like, how do you trust people to do what you do, right? The biggest factor, right?
Yeah.
So those are all questions that I'm trying to figure out. Like, can this be a multi-million-dollar business? Is this just going to be like a 100K or 200K a year? You know what I mean? Like, how do you take a business to another level, especially when it's in the maker space, right? Because literally you're going to be in your basement like day and night. And I have friends that are trying to scale these businesses. And like I have a friend, she makes jewelry and she ended up buying her machine too. And we kind of started at the tech shop at the same time, which is kind of ironic. And she bought her own machine and she has an apartment in the Mission and she bought a $40,000 machine in her apartment. Like it still blows my mind.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like it's the one thing that I kind of look back on, like, I've worked in all these different places, but like at the end of the day, obviously it's kind of cliche to say follow your passion, but I think at the end of the day, you just have to, it's also timing, right? It's also like, does this realistically make sense, right? Like if you love painting and you're going to quit your day job and just like paint for a living and not realistically think about like,
Eating.
what it is that's gonna like pay your bills or pay your mortgage or whatever it is, right? You got to be realistic as well at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the quotes of a good friend of mine, he says, this really hit home. So he's like, the only reason why artists are starving is because they don't really know what they're doing, right? And it's, if you think about that for a second, it's not that he's like basically saying artists aren't like talented. He's basically saying if you are talented and creative, you will find a way to make money, right?
Yes.
Like you'll hustle, you'll get into a retail store, whatever you have to do, you'll make it happen, right?
Yeah.
And that got me thinking. It's not about like, I kind of hate the term starving artist. Like I kind of hate that term, right?
Yeah.
But it's more about like how do you utilize your creativity, your skills, your talent, and not to sound capitalistic, but like how do you make money from it, right? And there's nothing wrong with making money, right? Like sure, you're an artist, like why not make money? Like you have a gift, right? You should monetize from it, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So touching on that, kind of piggybacking off that, what is your day-to-day like between juggling Shield Hero and studios? What is that like?
Yeah, so last year I was asked to design a mosque, which once again I'm super grateful for. It's an honor. It's such an amazing opportunity in Oakville, Ontario, which is about west of Toronto. And so that's been like literally every moment of my spare time. So it's the interior of a mosque. So it just got approved about a month and a half ago. It's under construction right now. Hopefully it'll open up by the end of the year. Knock on wood, as long as everything stays pretty stable regarding COVID and so on and so forth. So that's been like all volunteer work. I also teach design at York University, which I'm having a lot of fun about, just like sharing my wisdom to these guys as part of the York University continuing education program. I got Arabesque studios on the side. I did work at a VC firm. I'm no longer working there right now, so I'm focusing on this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like you know me. I mean, I just dabble in a billion things and like keep myself busy, and that's and I enjoy it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Where do you feel your drive, motivation, and success ultimately comes from?
That's a great question. So I would say like just reflecting back on my childhood and my life. I mean, my dad, he was born in the Congo, came to Toronto when he was 16. He kept the same job for 30 years.
Wow.
Which is crazy. He worked at Nestle, worked in the factory, worked his way up the chain. And then, I saw his work ethic, just how hard he worked. And I think hard work has been in my family. Like, it's just like, nothing was given to me. Like I've had like my first job was working at Wonderland, which was just taking season pass photos at the age of I think 15 or 16. Was a baseball umpire for like 12 years. Like I've done a lot of stuff. It's just about hustling. And I think it's just a matter of realizing like hard work literally does pay off.
Yeah.
So I just have this like relentless, I don't know where it comes from, to be honest. I just have this relentless drive. I'm actually been really on this Tony Robbins high. I don't know if you're familiar with this content.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are.
Yeah.
If you're doing those workshops or so on and so forth, there's seminars, but like, I'm actually doing one of his seminars this week, and I know that's gonna like take my potential to a whole nother level.
Yeah.
So I'm like super stoked and terrified about that. We'll see what happens in next week when I'm done with that. It's basically 50 hours across 4 days of like strategy about how to like take your life to another level. So I'm super stoked about that. But the other thing that I would say is like I just constantly I consume content. Like I'm always listening to audiobooks, podcasts.
Yeah.
Just constantly learning. And I just like to stay busy, to be honest.
That was a great answer. That was like the most detailed answer I think I've ever had, interviewing somebody. So I love to end the podcast with this last question. It stumps a lot of people.
Yeah.
If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, any age, any time in your life, what do you think that advice would be? That's
a great question. So what I would say embrace failure. And the reason why I say that is because every single moment reflecting back on my life where I've gone like to another level or I've been super motivated has always been through like something not working out or failing or like things just not ending up how you want it to be.
Yeah.
And I think what I would tell myself is just to embrace it, right? Like, don't beat yourself up. Just like, it's human nature to like pout or like, be depressed or be sad or whatever it is because you're just not getting the way you want something to be. But it's all part of God's plan, right? Like, you don't know what's going to be down the road when you think what you thought would happen or what you wanted would turn into something better or something else, right?
Yeah.
So I guess to answer your question, it's just embracing failure and like not really beating yourself about it because there's something else that will happen, right? Like as human beings, like we're just like, we will be sad and depressed, but like we will move on. Like we will be relentless. We will be resilient. We will continue figuring stuff out. And like, a lot of successful stories comes from failure, and like Thomas Edison and so on and so forth. Steve Jobs, it came from getting fired, or it came from your light bulb not working, or an explosion happening, or whatever it is. Right. So I think it's just embracing failure and just roll with the punches.
Yeah, that's a great answer. It took me a long time to realize that, just to basically trust the process, right? And like,
you gotta trust the process.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah. Well, hey man, this has been awesome. I appreciate you coming on. You are a great guest to have on, and I really see a lot of big stuff in your future for sure.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. If I can help too in any way with Shield Hero or anything, dude, let me know. If there's anything out there. If you need a salesman sometime down the road.
I'll take you up on that, man. We can expand into the SF market.
Of course. All right, dude. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care, man.